My name is Sophie Coldwell. I'm 25 years old. And this is the story of how my own family turned me into their personal servant, until I found the strength to walk away and build the life they swore I could never have. The day I graduated college should have been the happiest day of my life. I stood there on the wide green lawn of Westwood State, cap and gown slightly crooked, holding my diploma like it was a ticket to a whole new world. I was the first in my family to even go to college, let alone finish with a degree in business communications. When I looked out over the crowd, searching for familiar faces, I expected to see pride, cheers, maybe even tears. But when I finally spotted my parents, all I got was a polite, strained smile from my mother and a half-hearted thumbs up from my dad. No flowers, no excited hugs, no family celebration waiting after. Just a brief, awkward photo by the parking lot before they mumbled something about traffic and needing to get home. My older sister, Natalie, hadn't even shown up. She sent a text with a dozen emojis that felt more like an afterthought than a congratulation. I should have seen it then. The way they minimized every one of my milestones, the way Natalie's smallest accomplishments were treated like royal achievements while mine barely got a nod. But I brushed it off, too excited to let it ruin my day. I had a plan. Move back home just long enough to save up a little money, land a job downtown, and get my own cozy apartment where I could start my real life. When I pulled into the driveway of our old family home that gray afternoon in June, the first thing I noticed was how much smaller it looked. The beige siding had faded, weeds snuck up the edges of the porch, and the same dented mailbox hung by a single screw. I took a deep breath, told myself it was temporary, and dragged my suitcase up the steps. Inside, everything smelled the same, a mix of furniture polish, old books, and whatever Mom was cooking for dinner. For a moment I let myself believe it would be okay. Just a few months. I could endure anything for a few months. The first sign of trouble came faster than I expected. At dinner that night, over lukewarm lasagna, I mentioned casually that I had already started applying for jobs. My dad put down his fork and exchanged a glance with my mom. It was a look I knew all too well, the kind of silent conversation parents have when they're about to gang up on you. "That's great, honey," Mom said, her voice syrupy sweet. "But it might make more sense for you to stay here a bit longer. Help out around the house. Natalie and Mark are so busy with the kids these days." I blinked, confused. "Wait, Natalie. What does that have to do with me?" Dad cleared his throat. "They're planning on moving in for a little while. Just until they get back on their feet after Mark's job transfer fell through." I nearly dropped my fork. "Wait. They're moving here." Mom's smile tightened. "It's just temporary. Family helps family, Sophie. You'll still have your room. We're just asking you to be flexible. Maybe help watch the kids when you're not working." I stared at them in stunned silence. This wasn't what I agreed to. I had imagined a few peaceful months saving money, building my independence, not turning into a free babysitter while my sister took over the house. But I nodded anyway because what else could I do? I told myself it wouldn't be that bad. I'd be out soon. I just had to endure a little longer. Little did I know, that was only the beginning of my slow erasure. The next week blurred into chaos. Natalie and Mark arrived like a storm, their SUV spilling over with boxes, toys, and screaming children. 5-year-old Ava and 3-year-old Liam immediately took over the living room, scattering crayons, snack crumbs, and sticky fingerprints everywhere. My parents were over the moon, of course. Dad couldn't stop grinning at the kids' antics. Mom fussed over Natalie like she was a visiting queen. And me became invisible. No one asked where I was applying for jobs. No one cared that I spent hours each night refining my resume. All that mattered was that I was there, silent, available, and compliant. The first time they asked me to babysit, it was phrased like a favor. "Could you just keep an eye on them for an hour while Natalie and I run some errands?" Mom asked, already handing me a diaper bag before I could answer. That hour turned into 3. Then it became a regular thing. Whenever Natalie wanted to go out for drinks with friends or Mark needed alone time to play video games, guess who was expected to step in? If I protested, Mom would lay a guilt trip so thick it practically smothered me. "You're so good with them, Sophie. It's just a little help. Family sticks together." Meanwhile, Natalie barely acknowledged me unless it was to bark orders or toss responsibilities my way. She floated through the house like it was hers, redecorating the living room without asking, claiming the best parking spot, even commandeering the kitchen whenever she felt like it. At night, I'd lie awake in my childhood bedroom, the walls now vibrating with the sounds of crying toddlers or the thud of Mark's late-night TV marathons, and wonder how my life had derailed so fast. I kept telling myself it was temporary. Just get a job, save money, get out. But as the months dragged on, the invisible chains tightened around me. Whenever I got close to moving out, new demands would appear. Mom would casually mention how tight things were financially. Dad would hint that my small contributions to the grocery bill weren't quite enough. And Natalie? Well, Natalie would act like I owed her, like watching her kids was my sacred duty for existing. The final straw came on a rainy Thursday evening, 6 months after I moved back. I had finally landed a decent job at a mid-sized PR firm downtown. Nothing glamorous, but enough to afford my own tiny studio apartment if I budgeted carefully. I came home soaked from the bus stop, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves, ready to share the news. Instead, I walked into a full-blown family meeting. Mom, Dad, Natalie, and Mark were all seated around the dining room table, papers and bills spread out like war maps. Before I could even take off my coat, Mom looked up and said, "Sophie, we need to talk about your contributions." I stood frozen, dripping onto the linoleum. "What?" Dad tapped a spreadsheet with a grim expression. "We did some calculations. With the extra people in the house, expenses have gone up. Utilities, groceries, repairs. It's only fair you pay your share." Natalie chimed in, smirking. "Actually, since you're working now, you should cover a little more. I mean, you're single. No kids. No real responsibilities." Her words hit me like a slap. Real responsibilities. As if grinding through college, job hunting, and sacrificing my sanity to hold this circus together didn't count. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. No one would listen. They never had. In that moment, soaked to the bone and standing under the cold, judging eyes of my own family, something inside me snapped. A quiet, searing clarity flooded through me. I realized I could stay, keep being the obedient daughter, the background character in Natalie's perfect little drama. Or I could walk away. And this time I wouldn't look back. I didn't say anything that night. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step heavier than the last, listening to the quiet murmur of voices downstairs as they continued discussing my money like I was some invisible resource to be tapped into whenever they pleased. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at the cracked ceiling, letting the familiar ache settle deep into my chest. There wasn't going to be a negotiation. No compromise. In their eyes, my future had already been signed away. Another silent sacrifice for Natalie's happiness. The worst part. A small part of me had been trained to accept it. To believe that this was my role. Background character, emergency babysitter, financial backup. I thought about my job offer letter, neatly folded in my bag downstairs. About the tiny studio apartment I had found online. The one with the creaky floors and chipped tiles but freedom shining from every dusty windowpane. I closed my eyes and made the hardest decision of my life. The next morning, before anyone woke up, I packed a single suitcase. Clothes, laptop, a few keepsakes. Everything else, the framed diplomas no one cared about, the trophies from high school debate Natalie used to mock, I left behind without a second thought. I wrote a simple note and left it on the kitchen counter. "I'm moving out today. I won't be paying your bills anymore. Please don't contact me unless it's an emergency." By the time the sun rose, I was gone. I rented a small U-Haul truck and drove across town to my new apartment, a battered old building with peeling paint and an elevator that groaned with every floor. But when I turned the key and pushed the door open, it felt like stepping into another universe. A blank canvas. A space that was truly mine. I dropped my suitcase inside the door and sat down on the scratched wooden floor, overwhelmed by a mix of fear and exhilaration. For the first time in years, there was no one else's voice shouting over my own thoughts. No footsteps stomping above my head. No demands scribbled onto sticky notes plastered across my mirror. Just silence. Glorious, unbroken silence. I started work at the PR firm that Monday. It wasn't glamorous. Mostly answering phones, managing calendars, handling endless coffee runs. But it was mine. Every paycheck was a step closer to building something that belonged to me alone. For the first time in my life, I was setting boundaries. I didn't answer my family's calls. I didn't reply to the guilt-ridden texts that started flooding in within days of my departure. At first, the messages were pleading. Come home, we miss you. The kids keep asking where Aunt Sophie went. Then they turn nasty. Selfish brat. Family means sacrifice. You'll regret this. I blocked each number, one by one, until my phone was blessedly silent again. At work, I threw myself into every assignment. I stayed late without complaint. I volunteered for the difficult clients no one else wanted to handle. It wasn't about proving myself to my family anymore. It was about proving something to me. My manager, Mr. Holloway, noticed. You've got grit, Caldwell, he said one evening as I was stacking chairs after an event. Not many people do anymore. You keep this up and you'll go far. I tucked those words into my heart like precious jewels. Every day, I clawed a little further out of the hole my family had buried me in. I saved every penny. I skipped fancy coffees, ate ramen noodles, rode the bus even on rainy days. I knew what I was working toward. A life where no one could dangle love like a leash around my neck. 6 months later, I was promoted to junior account manager. I bought a second-hand car, an ancient Honda Civic that coughed awake every morning but never let me down. I started going to networking events, meeting people who saw me as more than just someone's backup plan. For the first time, I was building a community, not of users or guilt trippers, but of real friends. One evening, while attending a charity gala organized by our firm, I bumped into a woman who would unknowingly set the next chapter of my life in motion. Her name was Caroline Ellis, CEO of a high-end lifestyle brand that had just expanded to Pittsburgh. She was petite, poised, and wore confidence like an expensive perfume. We started chatting over glasses of cheap champagne, and somehow I made her laugh. Really laugh. The kind of deep, genuine laughter that feels like a crack of sunlight through clouds. You've got something, Sophie, she said, tapping her manicured finger against my name tag. Come see me next week. I think you're wasted here. Thought she was joking. People like her didn't offer chances to people like me. But she wasn't joking. That meeting led to an interview. That interview led to an offer. Triple my current salary, full benefits, and a mentorship under one of the sharpest minds in the business. The day I signed the contract, I walked out of the office building into the warm summer air, looked up at the blue sky, and realized I had done it. Not because of anyone else. Not for anyone else. Just for me. And that was the sweetest victory of all. But life has a funny way of circling back. Just when I thought I had left the past behind, it came roaring back into my life. Louder and messier than ever before. It started with a phone call from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello. A familiar voice, strained and desperate, crackled through the line. Sophie, it's Mom. We need you. For a moment I couldn't even speak. My chest tightened, old reflexes kicking in, the urge to drop everything to rush in and fix it all. But I wasn't that girl anymore. What's going on? I asked carefully, already bracing for the guilt trip. There was a beat of silence, then a shaky breath. It's Natalie and Mark. They're being evicted. Mark lost his job. They're drowning in debt. They need somewhere to stay. I closed my eyes, the memories flooding back like a tidal wave. The accusations. The manipulations. The nights I cried myself to sleep while babysitting kids I didn't bring into this world. And now they wanted to drag me back into their chaos. I opened my eyes, feeling a calm, icy clarity settle over me. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, my voice even. But I can't help you. Mom sputtered, shocked. As if it had never once occurred to her that I might say no. Sophie, please. You have a good job now. Nice place. Surely you can spare a couch for your own sister. I thought about the tiny apartment I had finally made into a home. About the peace I had bled for, fought for, earned. And I smiled, not cruelly, but with the gentle finality of someone who has finally chosen themselves. No, Mum. Can't. I won't. Before she could unleash the flood of guilt she was surely preparing, I ended the call and blocked the number. For good. Because this time I wasn't going back. For a few minutes after I ended the call, I just sat there, staring at the phone in my hand. My heart was pounding, my palms slightly sweaty, but underneath all that was something new, something solid. Relief. I hadn't caved. I hadn't folded myself into a pretzel to fit inside someone else's chaos. For the first time in my life I had protected my peace. Chosen myself over the endless black hole of their demands. And yet, deep down, a whisper of sadness floated through me. Not guilt, not anymore. But mourning. Mourning the family I wished I had. The one that celebrated my wins, supported my dreams, and didn't see me as a tool to be used and discarded. That family had only ever existed in my mind. It was time to let go of the illusion. I spent the rest of that evening curled up on my little balcony, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, sipping hot tea and watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. Each sip, each breath felt like another stitch sewing my heart back together. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my new job. Caroline Ellis was every bit as brilliant and demanding as I'd expected. But for the first time I wasn't afraid of hard work. I'd survived far worse. Under her mentorship I flourished. I helped land 2 major client accounts within my first 6 months. I presented at board meetings, pitched innovative campaigns, and even traveled to New York for a national branding summit. My name, started getting passed around the industry as someone to watch. Every success was a quiet rebellion against the girl my family had tried to keep small. But of course they didn't stay away forever. Started with emails. Long, rambling essays about how hard things had gotten since I abandoned them. About how Natalie and the kids missed me. About how I had broken the family apart. I deleted each one without reading past the first line. Then came the social media sabotage. Natalie started posting passive-aggressive quotes about ungrateful family members and selfish people who forget where they came from. Friends I hadn't heard from in years popped into my DMs, asking what was going on, trying to stir the pot. I didn't respond. I refused to feed the fire. And when that didn't work, they escalated. One Saturday morning, as I sipped my coffee by the window, there was a knock at my door. I frowned, setting down my mug. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. There, standing awkwardly in the hallway, was Natalie. She looked different. Thinner. Paler. The golden, untouchable aura she always carried was gone, replaced by a brittle sort of desperation. "Sophie," she said, her voice cracking. "Please." I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. "What are you doing here, Natalie?" She blinked rapidly, as if she hadn't expected me to be so cold. As if the months of silence between us hadn't happened. I just need a little help," she said, her voice trembling. "Just a place to stay. Just for a few weeks. You don't even have to do anything. Please. The kids." I shook my head, feeling a strange, detached sorrow. "You made your choices, Natalie. And so did I." Her eyes flashed, the old arrogance breaking through for a split second. "You think you're better than us now," she hissed. "Just because you have some stupid job and a crappy apartment." I smiled, but it wasn't out of anger. It was pity. "No, Natalie. I don't think I'm better. I think I'm finally free." I started to close the door. Her face crumpled, real panic surfacing. "Sophie, wait. We're family. You can't just turn your back on us." The words struck something inside me, but not the way she intended. Because for the first time I realized that family isn't just blood. It's not just obligation. Family is supposed to lift you, not chain you. Support you, not drain you. And if they couldn't understand that, if they had only ever loved me conditionally, transactionally, then maybe they were never truly family to begin with. I closed the door gently but firmly, leaving her standing there in the cold. I leaned my forehead against the door for a long moment, breathing deeply. Then I straightened, turned around, and walked back into my apartment, my life without a single backward glance. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about everything I had lost, and everything I had gained. I'd lost the approval of people who never truly saw me. I'd lost the constant weight of other people's expectations. I'd lost the sick, gnawing guilt that had chewed through my happiness for years. But I had gained something far more valuable: freedom, self-respect, and that, I realized, was worth more than all the empty apologies and conditional love in the world. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Caroline. Subject line: opportunity of a lifetime. I opened it with shaking hands. She was offering me a promotion, a senior strategist position at their New York headquarters, double the salary, a relocation package, the chance to build campaigns that would be seen across the entire country. I laughed, a wild, disbelieving sound, and then I cried big messy tears that soaked into my pillow. Because the life I had once only dared to dream of, it was happening. Not because someone handed it to me. Not because someone bailed me out. 'Cause I fought for it. 'Cause I chose it. 'Cause I earned it. The decision should have felt harder. New York was massive, overwhelming, fast in ways Pittsburgh never even tried to be. I had never lived more than an hour away from my childhood home. Part of me, the part that had spent years trapped under obligation, whispered that it was too much too soon. But the louder part, the stronger part, silenced that fear easily. This was my second chance, my clean slate, my real beginning. I accepted the offer within the hour. Caroline's response was instant and full of congratulations. A moving company would be provided. A temporary apartment set up for me until I found my own place. I had 3 weeks to get everything in order. 3 weeks to say goodbye to the last remnants of my old life. I didn't tell anyone from my family. I didn't owe them that. Instead, I quietly packed up my little apartment, room by room, each box a symbol of freedom earned, not given. I sold my faithful old Honda for a decent price and celebrated with a small slice of tiramisu from the bakery down the street. I walked every inch of my Pittsburgh neighborhood one last time, memorizing the cracked sidewalks and crooked streetlights that had seen me through my rebirth. And when the moving truck pulled up early on a misty Saturday morning, I didn't cry. I climbed into the passenger seat, fastened my seatbelt, and whispered to the rising sun, "Let's go." New York hit me like a tidal wave. The noise, the energy, the endless buzz of life thrumming under my skin. My tiny temporary apartment was a shoebox compared to even my modest Pittsburgh place, but I didn't care. Every honking cab and rumbling subway train was a heartbeat of a city where anything was possible. At work, Caroline threw me into the fire without hesitation. High-profile clients, brutal deadlines, expectations that could crush a weaker spirit. But I wasn't weak anymore. I pulled 14-hour days, met with executives in glass skyscrapers, pitched brand strategies that made seasoned veterans raise their eyebrows in grudging respect. I wore tailored suits and sensible heels, carried myself with a confidence I hadn't known was inside me. And slowly, steadily, I built a reputation. By the end of my first year, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I had clients asking for me by name. I was mentoring junior associates. I had built a life that was entirely mine, brick by painstaking brick. For the first time in my memory, I didn't wake up dreading the day ahead. I woke up excited, grateful, fiercely proud. And then, just when I had almost forgotten the hollow ache my family had left behind, karma came knocking. It started with a message from an old high school friend, Andrea, who still lived back in Pittsburgh. "Hey Soph, weird question. Did you hear about your sister?" I stared at the message, my heart immediately tensing before typing back no. "What's going on?" The story unfolded in pieces. Mark had never really gotten back on his feet after losing his job. They had bounced from rental to rental, each one smaller and shabbier than the last. Debt piled up. Creditors started calling. The perfect suburban life Natalie had once flaunted so proudly crumbled away into something much smaller, much meaner. And now, Andrea said, the latest rental company was suing them for damages. Apparently, Natalie had tried to pass herself off as a business consultant to secure a better lease, using a fake resume and references. When the lies unraveled, so did their last hope. They were being evicted. Again. Worse yet, Natalie had gone crying to everyone she knew, painting herself as a tragic victim, abandoned by her ungrateful little sister who forgot her roots. Andrea sent a screenshot of one particularly bitter Facebook post. Family is supposed to lift you up, not turn their backs when you need them most. Some people get a little success and think they're too good for the people who raised them. Underneath were comments from old neighbors and distant relatives, people clucking their tongues, casting judgment, mourning the downfall of poor Natalie. For a moment, I felt a flicker of old guilt trying to rise up. But then I looked around at my life. My tiny, thriving apartment decorated with soft lights and bookshelves bursting with stories, my desk covered in projects I loved, my fridge stocked with groceries I had bought with my own hard-earned money. I remembered the endless nights of unpaid babysitting, the shouted accusations, the way they had made me feel like my dreams were selfish. And I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No pity. Just a clean, clear separation. Their chaos wasn't mine anymore. And it never would be again. Still, part of me knew. Natalie wouldn't go down quietly. She would try something desperate. I could feel it like a storm brewing on the horizon. I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find a letter shoved under my door. There, in her familiar loopy handwriting, was a desperate plea. Sophie, please. Just for a little while. The kids are scared. We have nowhere else to go. You're successful now. You can afford it. Please. You're still their aunt. You still have a heart. Right? No threats. No guilt trips. Just raw, shameless begging. I sat down on my worn leather couch, the letter limp in my hands, and stared out at the glittering New York skyline. The old Sophie, the one who bent over backward to earn scraps of approval, might have caved. But I wasn't her anymore. I folded the letter neatly in half, dropped it into the trash, and went about my evening. I didn't owe them anything. I had built this life, this peace, with my own blood, sweat, and tears. And I wasn't about to let anyone steal it from me. Not even the people who once called themselves family. The next few weeks passed in a strange, bittersweet haze. Sometimes I caught myself standing at the window, looking out over the crowded, neon-lit streets of Manhattan, wondering if I had been too cold, too ruthless. Had I truly become the selfish person Natalie always accused me of being? But then I'd remember the years of unpaid labor. The sacrifices that had been demanded, never acknowledged. The way love had always been used as a leash, a currency. And I would feel the solid, comforting weight of my own freedom all over again. It was around this time that Caroline Ellis called me into her corner office, a sleek glass box that overlooked the endless pulse of the city. I thought it would be a routine check-in, maybe a review of my latest project. Instead, she smiled, a real smile, rare and radiant, and said, "Sophie, have you ever considered starting your own firm?" I blinked at her, stunned. My own firm. Caroline leaned back in her chair, studying me like she already knew the answer. "You have the drive, the grit, the network. You've outgrown us, and I mean that as the highest compliment. We'd hate to lose you, but I'd hate even more to see you caged by playing small." My heart hammered against my ribs. Start my own firm. Sounded insane. Sounded impossible. Sounded exactly right. I spent the next several nights wide awake, scribbling plans in a notebook, running numbers, drafting business models. By the end of the month, I had registered Caldwell Strategies, LLC. By the end of the next, I had rented a tiny office space in a WeWork downtown, barely big enough for a desk and 2 chairs. But it was mine. My first clients came from old connections, companies who had admired my work under Caroline and were eager to follow me into whatever future I was building. Word spread fast. Within 6 months, Caldwell Strategies wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. I hired 2 assistants, then a junior strategist. Eventually, we expanded into a full floor downtown, overlooking the East River. The girl who once cried herself to sleep in a storage room now stood at the helm of a rising empire. And every brick had been laid with my own 2 hands. I never advertised my success back home. I didn't need to. But of course, small towns have long memories and even longer gossip chains. It wasn't long before I started getting the messages. From distant cousins, old neighbors, even old classmates who had once smirked when I babysat my sister's kids instead of partying with them. Saw your feature in Forbes. So proud of you, Sophie. Wow, you're killing it in New York. Always knew you had it in you. Hey, remember me? We should totally catch up. I smiled at each message, polite but distant. I knew who had been there for me when I had nothing. And I knew who hadn't. Then came the one I had been bracing for. An email. From Natalie. Subject line, family. For a moment, my finger hovered over the delete button. But something, curiosity maybe, made me open it. It was short, blunt, strange. Heard about your business. Congrats. The kids and I are still struggling. Thought you might want to help your niece and nephew out since you're doing so well. After all, family helps family, right? No apology. No acknowledgement of the years of mistreatment. Just the same old entitlement, repackaged with a bow. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. The audacity was almost laughable. For a few minutes, I considered ignoring it. Blocking her forever. Then, a better idea bloomed in my mind. A way to end it once and for all. Not out of cruelty but clarity. I typed back, my fingers steady, my heart steady. Dear Natalie, I appreciate you reaching out. You're right. Family should help family. Unfortunately, you made it very clear years ago that you saw me not as family, but as a resource. A babysitter, a bill payer, a background character. When I needed support, understanding, or even basic respect, you and the rest of the family offered none. I have built my life from the ground up without your help. I intend to continue doing so, without being dragged backward into the dysfunction I fought so hard to escape. I wish you well. Truly do. But I am not your safety net. I am not your solution. And I am not responsible for fixing choices I had no part in making. Please do not contact me again. Then I hit send. Simple. Firm. Final. I sat back in my chair, feeling no anger, no guilt, only an immense, bone-deep peace. I had drawn a line that would not be crossed. Had chosen myself. And it felt incredible. That evening, standing at my office window overlooking the glittering river, I allowed myself a quiet smile. The girl they had once dismissed, used, and discarded had become someone unstoppable. Not because of spite. Not because of revenge. But because she had finally learned the greatest lesson of all. That real strength is knowing when to walk away from people who refuse to respect you, and never looking back. The weeks after I sent that final email were some of the most peaceful of my life. I poured everything into my company, watched my client roster grow, celebrated every little win. I moved into a beautiful loft overlooking the city, exposed brick walls and tall windows that bathed everything in golden light each morning. It was the life I'd once thought existed only for other people. Now it was mine. For the first time, truly and fully, I had become my own family. One late afternoon, as I packed up my office after a marathon meeting with a luxury hotel client, my assistant Mallory poked her head through the door. "You have a visitor," she said, a bit hesitantly. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. Before I could ask, Mallory stepped aside, and there she was. Natalie. I stood frozen, my bag halfway zipped. She looked weathered, older somehow. Her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, clothes wrinkled and tired-looking. But it wasn't just the physical signs, it was something deeper. An air of defeat that clung to her like a second skin. For a long, silent moment, Neither of us spoke. Then she stepped inside, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. "Sophie," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I had to see you." I closed my bag, keeping my movements slow, deliberate. "I told you not to contact me," I said evenly. "I know." She swallowed hard, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But I didn't know how bad things could get." I said nothing. She twisted her fingers together, glanced around the polished office space, the glass walls, the city skyline beyond. I could see it in her eyes, the shock, the disbelief. She had truly never imagined I could build something like this. Maybe she had thought I would always be that shadow, that backup plan she could call on when things got hard. "Mark left," she blurted out. "Took off. Said he couldn't handle it anymore. Left me with everything, the debt, the kids, the mess." A small, sharp pang twisted in my chest, but it wasn't pity. It was something colder, bitter. "And now you want me to clean it up," I said quietly. Her face crumpled. "No, I mean yes, I don't know. I don't know who else to turn to." I stared at her for a long time, memories flooding back. The nights spent scrubbing crayon off important documents. The weekends stolen by babysitting while she went out to expensive dinners. The way she had laughed in my face when I dared to suggest my dreams mattered too. And now here she was, finally stripped of her pride, finally realizing that the people you step on your way up might not be there when you fall. "I'm sorry for what you're going through," I said, and I meant it. "But you made your choices, Natalie. And I made mine." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "You were right," she whispered, broken. "You were always right." I felt the final pieces of resentment loosen from my heart and fall away. Not because she said the words, but because I no longer needed them. I had already freed myself. I walked to the door and opened it wide, the afternoon sun flooding the room. "I hope you find your way," I said, my voice soft but unshakable. "But you'll have to do it without me." For a moment she just stood there, her lip trembling, her shoulders hunched. And then, slowly, she nodded. Without another word, she turned and walked away. I watched her disappear down the hallway, growing smaller and smaller, until she rounded a corner and was gone. Closed the door, locked it, and exhaled a breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. It was over. Not with shouting. Not with revenge. Not with the fantasy of them crawling back and begging for forgiveness. But with quiet, dignified closure. The kind that didn't need witnesses or applause. Just the kind that mattered most. The one inside myself. That evening I celebrated by doing something simple. Something pure. I took myself out to dinner at a little Italian restaurant tucked away on a side street. The kind of place I used to dream about while scrubbing dishes back home. I ordered a glass of wine, a plate of carbonara, and the richest slice of tiramisu they had. I sat by the window, watching the city glow and pulse around me, and I smiled. Not because someone else had finally recognized my worth, but because I had. And I would never, ever forget it again. In the months that followed, I lived a life so full, so rich, so vibrant, that it almost felt like I was waking up from a long, heavy dream. Each morning, sunlight streamed into my loft, painting the walls with gold. I would sit with my coffee in hand, watching the city slowly come alive, and I would feel a peace so deep, so profound, that it sometimes brought tears to my eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of gratitude. Gratitude for every hard decision. Every night I had cried myself to sleep. Every time I had wanted to give up but didn't. Because without all of it, the pain, the betrayals, the loneliness, I would never have found this version of myself. The one who chose herself. The one who fought to be free. The one who never settled for being anyone's backup plan again. Caldwell Strategies continued to thrive, growing beyond even my wildest dreams. We landed national campaigns, partnered with luxury brands, and even hosted our own leadership seminars. People started to know my name. Not as someone's daughter, not as someone's sister, but as Sophie Caldwell. Theo. Founder. Force of nature. Every success felt like a private, silent revolution. Every new client, every award, every contract signed was a brick in the empire I had built with my own hands. Occasionally, whispers from the past would find their way to me. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that Natalie had moved back in with my parents, that they were scraping by on part-time jobs and government assistance, that the shine had worn off completely, leaving nothing but bitterness and blame. But by then those whispers barely touched me, because I had long since closed that chapter. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. One bright spring afternoon, standing at the podium of a leadership conference, facing a crowd of hundreds, I realized just how far I had come. The hotel ballroom was packed. The air buzzed with anticipation. I wore a sleek navy suit, my hair pinned up, a small gold necklace glinting under the lights, a gift to myself the day I signed the lease on my first real office. As I stepped up to the microphone, I looked out over the sea of faces, young women, hopeful entrepreneurs, students clutching notebooks, and I smiled. Not the smile of someone pretending to be confident. The smile of someone who was. I cleared my throat and began. I want to tell you a story, I said. About a girl who grew up believing that love had to be earned. That loyalty meant sacrifice without end. That saying no made you selfish. That dreams were a luxury you had to give up for the comfort of others. I paused, letting the silence settle. That girl almost gave up. Almost shrank herself small enough to fit inside the expectations others built for her. Another breath. But one day she realized something. Something no one had ever told her. I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady and strong. That you do not have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. A ripple moved through the room. A quiet, stunned energy, like a collective heartbeat skipping a beat. You are allowed to choose yourself, I continued, my heart pounding not with fear but with power. You are allowed to walk away from those who only love you conditionally. You are allowed to dream, loudly, unapologetically. You are allowed to build a life so beautiful, so full, that the people who once doubted you can do nothing but watch from a distance. I smiled again, not at the audience but at the girl I used to be. And you owe no one an explanation. The room erupted into applause, wave after wave crashing over me, but all I could feel was that quiet, unshakable certainty burning inside my chest. I had made it. Not in spite of walking away but because I walked away. Later that night, after the conference, I returned to my loft, kicked off my heels, and curled up by the window with a cup of tea. Outside, the city pulsed with life. And inside so did I. I opened my notebook, the same blue leather one I had bought the night I first left home, and turned to a blank page. I wrote just 2 words across the top. Thank you. Not to them, but to myself. For surviving. For fighting. For believing. Because at the end of the day, the greatest revenge was never proving them wrong. It was proving myself right. And living a life they could never take away. Sophie's story reminds us that real strength doesn't come from clinging to toxic loyalty. It comes from choosing your own peace, your own dreams, and your own worth, no matter how hard it hurts at first. As Sophie learned, you do not have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Sometimes walking away isn't selfish. It's survival. It's the first step toward becoming who you were always meant to be. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who might need to hear these words today. And if you believe in the power of reclaiming your life, subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge.